Hey, look at that place. Oh my gosh, that thing's fantastic. You guess, can you hear me, Ezra?
I can hear you. How are you, Mark?
Nice, man. Again, I'm going to give you the award right now for the best studio shot of all the guests I've had on.
Is
Period.
that right?
I'm not kidding.
Whoa.
You got the bucking bronco, which I'm hoping might be coming my way. I don't know if it is, but it's beautiful regardless. You've got all the animals. This is for all the people who can't maybe not be watching this on YouTube, but you're dressed in a very festive Mexican slash Medicine Man Gallery logo shirt. You got the brushes, you got the paints. The studio is clean. You're shaven. You look good.
Thank you. Thank you. So do you. Now, does any money come with this award?
Yes, there does come some money, but it's not in American money. I'm sorry. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's kind
Hopefully
of
not Bitcoin.
no, Bitcoin still have value. No, we'll give you something else like Solana or one of the other. Actually, Solana's pretty good.
Okay.
It's probably the one I'd want. How are you?
Okay.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Busy, but good.
That's good.
It's
What
nice
are
and
you
cold
working on?
outside. Say again?
What are you working on? I know you have something coming up for the Core Show, right?
Yes, I do. Gosh, I'm working on probably four different pieces for upcoming exhibitions.
Wow.
Um, the piece behind me is going to the archery. And then I've got, right now the Coors show is going on. They just opened that, I think, the Young Guns show
Right.
last week. So I've got four, five, six pieces in that. And the Briscoe is coming up. And I'm
When
also
is that?
working on some pieces. That's going to be in March,
Yeah.
Night of the Artist. So I've got quite a few things happening all at once.
Left out.
I
You
can't even
left out.
remember.
I was going to say you left out one of the more important ones, in my opinion, for February, the Rodeo Day Tucson.
Oh, I'm working on that too. So hopefully I can get that done over the Christmas holiday. But I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to being part of that.
Oh no, it's going to be fun.
Now, give me.
Yeah, I was going to say I had Maeve Eichelberger on yesterday. She
Yeah,
came into town. She's going to be in the show, and your name came up as well. I think you guys were doing a Zoom or something for Young Guns stuff. And I said, yeah,
yes,
Ezra's going to be here. I'm hoping you're going to show up for the show.
I will see.
Yeah,
I will see. I've got so many different directions I'm going in.
right.
So right now I'm trying to make reservations for all these different travels. So if I can squeeze you in, I will be there.
All I will say is in February, very nice here. Not so nice in Colorado Springs, I don't think.
I like cold and snow.
You do?
We've got about an inch of snow on the ground. It's about close to freezing. I'm inside. I'm warm. I love it when it snows because things quiet down and I can concentrate and don't have to think about distractions out there.
Now that's a
So I'm all good.
that's a little bit different than where you grew up, right? You grew up in Tennessee, is that right?
Memphis, Tennessee.
I'm going to jump right into it. We got Ezra Tucker here on the Art Dealer Diaries, and we're just starting the podcast. I want to hear about Memphis. What was that like in Memphis? I spent a summer in Memphis, Tennessee, in the military at Millington Hospital. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, yes,
Hottest place I've ever been in my life was Memphis, Tennessee.
yeah.
I went fishing one day and I literally thought I could die on this little boat and no one would know it because it's so hot. Well, what was that like?
Well,
What were your parents doing in Memphis?
my parents were mom and dad were farmers. They grew up on a farm in Mason, Tennessee, a small town, and the my dad was Pentecostal minister and also a factory worker. He worked at this factory, the company called Hunter Fan. I think Casablanca fans bought them out at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And he made motors for ceiling fans for a good 31 years and retired. But he was a Pentecostal minister. Mom was a homemaker. and mom and dad raised 6 kids, and
Mm,
I'm number 5 or 6.
mm,
So that was a factory worker for a lot of years, and that's something I didn't want to do.
I bet.
And
He probably didn't want you to do it either.
uh, he thought it was an honorable thing to do.
Mm,
Being in the South, there weren't a lot of professionals that my dad was surrounded by or that I was exposed to,
mm,
and most people were laborers, factory workers, farmers, so on. And I just never wanted to do that type of work long term. But those are the only options that were open to my dad.
mm,
And he did it. He raised the family. And being a Pentecostal minister, he was also involved in the community.
hmm.
And like you said, it was hot, it was muggy, it was bugs, it was
Yeah,
miserable. That's why I'm here in Colorado.
I get
I
it.
like cold, dry, no bugs, nature, and growing up inner city was, pretty difficult. I didn't like growing up in urban environments. I wanted to be in the country. And so now I'm in the pine forest. I've got mule deer and cougar and bears and foxes and bobcats and owls and all kinds of nature running around outside in the backyard.
That's
So
always been a big component of who you are, right? Is
yeah.
wildlife and nature. And do you think that originated with your families, not your dad's, but your dad's parents? They grew up on a farm, right? Or they were in a farm. Did you spend time going and being around those kind of animals, that kind of thing?
Well, yes. As a baby, a young kid, we would visit family out, because my uncle maintained the farm after. My grandfather had like 9 kids,
Wow.
and that was his staff, that was his workforce.
Yeah, I get it.
Was 9 kids working the farm and so on. And but my uncle, he's the only one that stayed. Other family members moved off, went up north, New York, Wisconsin, Chicago, different places. And but he maintained some, livestock, horses, cows, pigs, chickens. It was a subsistence farm. He sustained his family that way. And
Hmm.
so when we go out to visit, I was, in the barns, out in the fields with the chickens and the horses and all of that, and drawing pictures. Always carried a little piece of paper, usually a piece of paper or cardboard, with me, and I'd sit out and draw the animals. But as far as wildlife, no, there was no real wildlife out there other than squirrels. So,
Yeah.
so I draw pictures of squirrels.
But you like it all, right? I mean, or am I wrong? Or do you really just hone in more on wildlife versus horses and cattle and that kind of thing?
Well, I've been drawing since I was like 5 years old. I was always fascinated with nature, and like uh, a lot of the nature shows that came on TV, black and white TV,
Right.
was fun for me. And I know the American Sportsman or something like that came on Sundays, and
Hmm.
I was all, hunters out in the wild. I was fascinated with that, and I was sitting down in front of the TV and drawing and trying to, create the images that I saw on TV. And but books, I loved books on nature, and going to elementary school, we had a library there, and I spent a lot of time in the library just looking for books on nature. National Geographic magazine. There were lots of, I guess, books for kids
Hmm.
on nature, and those are always the books that I checked out. And teachers were always saying to me, "Well, don't you want to do something else? Read something else?" And I'm
Mm.
like, "No, I'm fine. I'm And but I was always fascinated with adventure stories, all of the classics, N.C. Wyeth and a
Mm.
lot of those illustrators. Those were the books that I read. Those are the images that are still burned into my memory of these amazing images that these artists created from their imaginations. So, but animals, um, going to zoos was
Right.
always, big fun. Still is for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like going to zoos and natural history museums. So it's always been a real fascination. And the thing that I was telling a fellow recently is, with my dad being a Pentecostal minister, the Bible was the only major book in our household, and I had to read that.
Mm.
I was I was always expected to know biblical scripture, because you got Sunday, you got Wednesday, you got Friday, you're in church, you're in Bible study, and I get very bored because I heard these stories over and over again. Other than Garden of Eden, Noah's Ark, and the story of Moses.
Mm.
Those were the things that fascinated me, and I had an imagination, and so I was always drawing in my Bible, little images while Dad's up preaching. I was sitting
Mm-hmm.
there drawing, and sometimes Dad would say, "Ezra, put down the pencil, listen."
Mm-hmm.
So that was how I grew up, is just being fascinated with the images that I came up with from reading and just doing the research that I enjoy doing to this day.
With your dad being a minister and being in Memphis, was there any connection at all with Dr. King?
Yes, 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 there was. Dad, commitment. He was part of the Church of God in Christ, and he was one. My grandfather also was involved with the development and the organization of the Church of God in Christ. And so, they were the church was the center of the community, the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I was born in 1955, so at that time, that's beginning of the civil rights movement after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Dad was involved with a lot of the political and a lot of the social things that were happening in the Black community, because that was, we were all affected by that. We were a poor family. Gradually we moved into middle class from Dad's. My dad would work sometimes 3 jobs, one during the day, one at night. And then on Saturdays, he would be a janitor
Mm.
in different places. But, raising 6 kids with not a lot of opportunity, um, you know, that whole movement about, poverty, and the unfairness of how poor people were living, Black and white. You had a lot of poor farmers in the South. My dad's, came from that, and Mom did too. They were both born in Mason, Tennessee, and so when all of that movement happened, we were affected by that. My dad was involved with that. There are lots of things that happened in the 60s, right before Martin Luther King was assassinated. There were a lot of threats that came at my family because of my dad's involvement with trying to get the garbage workers fair pay and a comfortable quality of life. That was a whole. I remember that time very vividly because there was a lot of stress.
I bet.
There was a lot of uncertainty, and it was a difficult time.
And you were like 13 when Dr. King was assassinated, right?
Yes, I was.
In Memphis, Tennessee, no doubt.
Oh
So
yeah.
that had to be just freaking devastating for not only you, but your family and the whole community.
Oh well, yeah. It changed the community. It really. There's still lingering things from that in
Mm.
Memphis,
I bet.
and I know that's it's really difficult to, I guess, if you haven't been in it, to understand it. But my dad was very close to that
Mm.
in the meetings. The night before King was killed, my dad was there at Mason Temple, which was the headquarters for the Church of God in Christ,
Mm-hmm.
listening to that last speech that he gave.
Mm.
And so that affected my dad, and therefore it affected the family.
That's right.
Dramatically. And as far as for me, it was 13 years of age and just beginning to understand what racism was.
Mm-hmm.
That was not an issue that we discussed in our house. That was about everybody is equal. Don't care what you look like, where you came from, how much money you have or don't have. We're human beings with feelings and needs, and we need to live a quality of life that is makes sense. And that was for me when I realized that wasn't a common philosophy that was shared with people within the community and outside the community. It made me understand why we had to live on the south side of town,
Mm-hmm.
and whites lived on the east side of town, and they lived in communities called Germantown and Whitehaven. I'm like, whoa. So it's that obvious that people are separate that way, and I'm expected to live this way, and people over here are supposed to live. And I went, wow, that's fascinating that things are not as I expected them to be from all the efforts of the people that were involved with the civil rights movement and trying to get things to make sense and not just be so chaotic and painful. And it was painful for a lot of people. And I was very fortunate to have a father that was committed, and he was honest, he was direct, but he had a lot of pressure on him trying to help with the community.
I bet.
He had being involved with trying to feed people. We were not we weren't doing great, but we were doing better than some.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dad was feeding people, our neighbors, people within the church, on and on and on. He was out there actively dragging me along with him to be involved and get me to be aware of the circumstances that were real and that I was going to have to deal with. So it was fascinating just to thinking back and looking back at that period that I actually came out of that without being broken and all shattered.
Yeah. How about your other siblings? Because you were the fifth of the six, so there was, they were older and could really see it a little, in a different fashion, maybe in more as an adult, and see the pain. I'm sure that was just rampant throughout, not just the community, but your own family.
Yeah, I had a brother and four sisters, and my brother was the eldest, and he was 6 years older than myself, and he was supposed to keep all of us in line. And brother was very he's deceased now. He was very good for me. He was brother was an architect. He ended up being an architect.
Wow.
And structural engineer was
also an artist. I mean, that's art too. That's completely art.
It is.
Interesting.
And he was the one that gave me a pencil the first time. I think I was about 4 or 5. And he said, draw me a horse. And I did. And he was amazed by that. And because he could draw, and I loved his drawings. I looked through his notebooks and tablets and so on, and just try to copy his drawings. And that's how I remember first starting to draw. And but he was the one that really taught me and talked to me about all of the things that were going on around us socially, with all of the unrest. There were the marches and the violence and all the different things that went on after King was killed. And he did explain a lot of things to me because he was older.
Yeah.
Dad did not like to talk about those things, even though he was involved. He was trying to keep me away from that and my sister. But and Mom was a homemaker, so she was busy trying to keep us all together.
Right.
And but it's a lot of things were explained just by me being observant And that was something that my mom and dad always said is, I observed things more so than my siblings did. And I took things much more seriously than my siblings did. But we all were aware. It was just my approach was I wanted to read. I read a lot. So I read like 3 newspapers because I wanted to hear, because the newspapers were reporting the same incident in different ways.
Oh, I bet.
So you didn't know what the truth was.
Yeah.
And I thought if I read all the papers, I would be able to dissect what was actually happening. Me being involved in some of the marching that went on and some of the meetings that went on in the community about how strategies about how to go about, structuring the marches and so on. And it was nice to know that I was in a place where I thought things were changing and that I could affect those changes.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad thought me going into the ministry was probably the best way to make changes. And I'm like, nah, you're doing that already.
Yeah.
Your brother's doing that. Granddad did that.
Yeah.
I'm going to try a different way. And he just thought that was interesting that I always thought pictures mattered. They mattered to me. Looking at the Bible, seeing illustrated Bibles was like, wow, this is cool. To see that type of imagery. And I'm thinking nobody was around, so they're having to create this thing from their imaginations. And I thought, okay, I can do that. And I can also make a difference by the pictures that I created. And that's, I guess I was maybe 7, being in 2nd grade. And as I said, I was a reader. I was in libraries. I read anything that I could get my hands on, just about history, nature, and I was mythology, anthropology, all of these things still fascinate me, and I spent a lot of time with it. And it was me sitting down and just drawing from my imagination based on what I had read. And that was how my art career started. Teachers were fascinated, like, you drew this? Where'd you find a picture to copy that from? I said, I made it up. What do you mean you made it up? I said, if you read this passage here, this is what I'm illustrating here from using my imagination. And teachers just were like, wow, they thought it was magic for them.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, they hadn't seen somebody like you probably, maybe
Yeah.
ever. And they're like, they might not, because we don't promote arts in school as a general rule. And when somebody has that talent and that drive and that ignition, and in your case, it's it's coming from someplace deep inside you, usually it has to come from the school system to help you, but you had it and you're sharing it out to the world, to the teachers, and they're like, wow. And so what did they do with that? Did they encourage you and go, okay, you need to, really follow this path, and here's some things that we can recommend so that you use these gifts? Or were they just like, wow, that's magic, and okay?
I got a lot of encouragement from school, and I'm grateful that I had that. I was very fortunate to have instructors that identified what I was doing and thought that others could benefit from that. And the story I love to tell is, being in 2nd grade and being in a reading group, and I like to read a lot of mythology, Greek mythology, and we happened to be in the textbook. Aesop's Fables was in the textbook, and it was a reading class, and the teacher had to leave the room, and for some reason, and we were supposed to be reading. And when she got back to the room, we were supposed to discuss the story. First of all, the story was about a lion and a mouse. That's the story that we have to read, The Lion and the Mouse. And I love the image. And there was a black and white drawing in the book that I copied very quickly in my tablet. And when the teacher comes in, I'm still drawing, and she's irate, and Tucker, you're supposed to be reading. what are you doing? And she comes over, takes my tablet, and she sees this drawing. And she starts crying. And she's
Wow.
like, you drew this? And I said, yes. She said, did you trace it? And I'm like, no, what is that? What does that mean? And I just handed the drawing. And so she took me to the office, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get suspended. Things are going to fall apart. Major trouble. And she showed it to the principal of the school. And the principal was, just impressed with the fact that I had done that. 7-year-old kid, and it's something that they recognized. And from then on, it was like, bulletin boards, all the, decorations that went on in the classroom. I got a chance to do those things.
Wow.
Whenever there were like, they have these contests at school where all the grades had to submit artwork for an annual show or something.
Right.
My drawings and my paintings were always, I was getting awards. I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that it was on the wall.
Right.
And being a kid, and so I got a reputation as the school artist.
Yes. And you were.
Teachers, principals, they all knew me. I was a good student also. I was one of those honor students that read everything. I read encyclopedias. I loved encyclopedias. And so whenever we had class assignments to get extra points to your grade, added to your grade, you do something that's not in the textbook. Do something that's not expected. And so I would make models out of clay and, do paint for geography. I'd do big maps of the countries we were studying, do paintings of the people or the animals. I love to do the animals that were native to those regions. So, so teachers love to have that on their walls. And so when the people from the administration, from the Board of Education would come to visit, my artwork is all over. So, and teachers just, Ezra, you can do this instead of writing a book report. I said, but I want to write the book report too. So I did book reports and the visuals.
Wow.
And that's basically how I got through my 12 years of school. I went to public school.
Yep.
Very nice that educators were committed to because of the 60s, when, because of separate and unequal.
Right.
Educators were they identified a lot of kids that were within the school system, and especially the school that I went to. And they would pull out students that were, they say, advanced and exceptional in grade point average and interest. And I was very fortunate to get isolated and put into a grouping of like 60 students that went through school. This is mainly high school, from middle school through high school, where I was expected to do exceptional work. So, so I was an honor student going through school, and plus my art was part of the thing that really drove me. I wanted to be an artist. I knew I wanted to be an artist from the time I was like 7 years old. And everything was about that. It was about being about being a good artist. And my brother, being older than myself and watching me mature, he knew I liked animals. And the coolest thing that he did for me was gave me a book on Charles Knight, the artist that did a lot of natural history paintings. And he gave me a publication that I still have in my library. He gave it to me, I think I was 13 at the time. And he always said to me, you need to learn how to draw animals from the inside out. Don't just draw them as you see them. Learn the anatomy. And so that book is the one that really started me trying to understand the anatomy of animals, seeing the muscle and bone structure and the conformations. And so a lot of that is, burned into my memory. So I basically, draw now just from memory. I don't have to use photographs to work from. And that was something, like you were saying, a lot of educators, in high school and in college were saying, how do you know these things?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have students that draw out of their heads. And I'm thinking, well, everybody can do it. It's just all they have to do is
Yeah, just
just
do
try.
it. No, that's not hard, right? I find it
Exactly.
interesting your brother gave you that book when you were 13 in 68, and I wonder, is he trying to go, okay, I want to distract him, I want to focus him, I want to keep him on the right path, you know. I don't, you just wonder turmoil wise at that same time that book appears in your life.
Oh yeah. I have no idea about that. I've never asked him that question, but he was always fascinated with me being, you know, the young kid that could match him
Mm-hmm.
with his drawing. And I thought about being an architect myself
Mm-hmm.
when I was, just because of him,
Mm-hmm.
because he was an excellent student. He was very good at it. And I wanted to be as good as he was. And I passed him at a certain point with my ability to just draw from nature
Right.
and draw the human figure. And I think that was the thing that he saw, that I was motivated, and also with architectural rendering, because I designed the home that I live in,
Mm.
because my skills, I understand architecture. I didn't get an education in it, but I was around it enough to know different things about design and structure and supports and all that,
Mm-hmm.
materials. But brother he was just fascinated with me, and he wanted me to do well,
Mm-hmm.
because we had many talks, and just that, like, again, that the whole situation of coming out of poverty and wanting to live well. What do you have to do that?
Right.
As my mom always said, do something well and you will live well.
Mm.
And and that was, for me, was my art, was
Yeah.
just learning how to do things that others couldn't do. I didn't realize that until I was in college, that everybody couldn't draw. You know,
Yeah.
people see
It's just
color
you had this
differently.
gift, when you have that gift, it just seems so, and I don't want to use the word easy, but it's there and it's natural, it's organic, and it is hard for others. I see it in artists all the time, and I'm always in awe when I see that ability, what they can do. And it's been there since a little kid. Um,
Yeah,
so you had that, whatever that is, you had it in spades.
yeah. And I didn't know what that was, and I still don't know what that is,
Right.
but I just know it's the thing that I get up every day,
That's it.
with
That's
ideas
what it is. Yeah.
and imagination. I keep sketchbooks all over, because I get different inspiration constantly, and so I'm scribbling things down all the time. And my kids watch me, and they're like, you're always thinking about stuff, Dad. And I'm like, well, yeah,
Yeah, that's what you
that's
do.
just what I want.
And so when you get through high school, you know what you want to be. You want to be an artist, right? And so you decide to go to art school, I assume, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And what art school did you ended up going to one in Memphis, right?
Yes, Memphis Academy of Arts,
Yes.
small private art school. Um, it was, it was on the side of town that my dad was not happy about. It was, the separate and unequal
Got it.
situation, because of the city being divided. It was all a lot of implied boundaries. You can't cross this street. You can't go to this neighborhood. You can't do
Right.
this. You can't do that. And I originally wanted to go to Pratt Institute in New York,
Mm-hmm.
or to Rhode Island School of Design. And the thing was, me being in high school, and in Memphis, Tennessee, they were trying to integrate the school systems.
Mm.
And so the first thing that they did was to move teachers from the east side of town, which was a white community, into the black schools on the south side of town, and moved black teachers into the white schools. And I was very fortunate to have an art teacher. I didn't have an art teacher. The art teacher that came to our school, that was across the hall from the art room that I was in, was aware of my work and my ability. And she watched me go from ninth grade through my senior year in school. Watched the work that I did, and never talked to me until my senior year. And then she finally called me into her room and had a meeting with me. She said, what are you going to do with your life? I said, I'm going to be an artist. She said, what are you going to do? Where are you going to, you going to get an education? I'm like, I hope so. And she said to me, Memphis State University was a big university there in Memphis. And that's where a lot of my buddies went to college, was to Memphis State locally. And I did not, as I understood it, to get the education that was available to me at Memphis State, I could come out with a teaching degree. And I thought, I don't want to be a teacher. I want no part of it. And when I was talking to her about that, and she said, well, there's Rhode Island School of Design, there's Pratt Institute. Here are some applications. Fill these out, send them in, and see if you get accepted. And I'm thinking, cool, art school. I mean, you just do art all day, every day, don't know academics and all of that. You just, and she said, yeah, if that's what you want to do. And I told her I had heard about commercial illustration, and that was something I was fascinated with. And she said, well, these schools have those types of programs. And I said, okay. I took the applications home, showed them to Dad. Dad said, nope, you can't do that. You're going to have to grow up someday and understand you got to make money. You've got to, take care of yourself. You can't be a starving artist. That's just not my dream for you. And he said, I was hoping you'd give up this idea about being an artist and think about doing something practical, like getting a factory job, getting married, having kids. And I said, well, Dad, I want to be an artist and I want to go to art school. And he said, yeah, this is in New York. This is, we can't afford that as a family. You've got 5 other siblings that need attention. And I'm like, well, but my brother went to University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee, for his education. And I thought, well, my brother, went out of town. How about me?
Right.
And he's, no, you're not going to be an artist. Artists don't live well. They have all kinds of problems. So if you want to go be an artist, you're going to have to go to Memphis State. And I just said, no, this is not going to go well. No, I can't. I don't want to go to university. And so I was pretty emotional about it. And I know I went back the next day and talked to the instructor. And I was pretty emotional about it. And she just said, I'm sorry, your dad's got, his standards. And she said, respect those things. But there's an art school across town that is a small school. It doesn't have all of the glamour that those other institutions have. Here's an application. You can apply and you can be right here in town. Your dad doesn't want you to leave Memphis. So it's right here. I didn't know that school existed because that was off limits for the Black community.
Right.
So I didn't know that even existed. And it was just kind of like, it was magic. It was a miracle. And I filled out the application. I sent it in. I didn't tell Dad. I got accepted. And me getting accepted was, it was like me, winning an award.
Right.
And so I took the papers to Dad. Dad said, there's an art school here in Memphis. And I'm like, yeah. And it's cheaper than me going to New York and different places. And I'm right here. And he was, he was not happy about that because he said, why don't you just give up this idea about being an artist? You got to be practical. You're a black man in America. You're never going to be able to survive as an artist. And that was disappointing, but that was my dad's reality, and I appreciated him saying that to me. But I was determined to go, and once I realized that it was more about me being an artist than anything for my father, because he just didn't want me to fail. He wanted me to succeed, and he was afraid that I would fail.
Yeah.
And so the thing that we negotiated, I had to negotiate with him because he was not going to agree to it. And so I had to get mom involved. And so it ended up being multiple discussions. And the agreement that I made with dad was, he said, if you're going to go to art school and be a failure, then you're going to have to help pay your tuitions. And I'm like, what does that mean? He says, you're going to get a job. And so I worked at night in order to help pay for my schooling. And it gave me a lot of discipline. Like I said, I'm very glad dad did that. I don't know if the results were what he expected, but I learned a lot from that. Just the fact that I was going to school 8 hours during the day, and I was working at Federal Express at night, loading airplanes from 11 o'clock at night to 3 in the morning. FedEx was just starting in Memphis at that time. And so I worked at a burger place and a Mexican restaurant, drove a limousine. I did all kinds of things to make an income and get my work done. And so, the dad just thought I'd give up.
Yeah.
And I finished. I got my BFA in advertising design. I graduated second in my class. And my dad was just kind of like, you just won't stop. I was employed. I got employed. I got an interview with Hallmark Cards in my senior year. And 10 days after graduating, I was at Hallmark Cards in Kansas City, Missouri, working with that company. But and my dad said to me afterwards, he said, out of all of the kids, you're the one that drove me crazy, because you always had your own vision of who you are and what you wanted to do. And you were the one that stuck with it and went through. And he says, I tried all I could to discourage you. You just wouldn't give up. And he was like that up until he passed away. He said, I still don't understand what you're doing, but you're the happiest and you have a career. You're doing well. You're living well. And he just said, I just never thought an artist succeed.
Yeah, it's a problem for a lot of people, unfortunately, is that, their parents, they want the best for their kids and they just look at art as a dead end. Even my parents, when I went into this as an art gallerist, they're like, you're going to quit medicine to do what? Open an art gallery? Are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
And it's like, nope. I did okay in medicine. I probably will do okay in this if I really want it that badly. And I think that's the thing as parents, they don't realize, they should, your dad in retrospect could have looked at you and go, okay, this is a kid who succeeded at everything he's ever done. Why wouldn't he succeed at this as well? But the parents get blinded because they want to see, they're afraid. They only have their story to think about. And their story was, I had to work my butt off. I had to work in this job. I had to work a lot of jobs. I know what it's like to have kids that are hungry and need a doctor and all that. And, they don't understand that other component as art can fill those needs, but you showed them how, clearly.
Yeah. Hopefully, I think, my family still, they're like, what are you doing? And you're doing well. How do you know? And I'm saying, I'm making it up as I go.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any examples. I don't know if you had examples.
None.
And it was, and I'm just thinking anything is possible.
Yep.
And those were the things, coming out of the civil rights movement that uh, a lot of the people that were involved that I respected, like Martin Luther King and Jesse Jackson, and there are others, on and on and on, local people that talked about excellence and being able to do whatever you choose to do.
Hmm.
That's what this country allows. And you can be anything you want to be if you're willing to put in the work
Mm-hmm.
and make the adjustments. You can be anything you want to be. And it's going to be easier for some, but you got to know what you're up against and pay attention to when those things change so that you can evolve and adjust to those things. And I guess, like I said, I've just been very fortunate that I've had opportunities, and I have taken risks that terrified my parents.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, you, who do you know that's done that before you?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, no, I don't know anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but I can be the first, to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And those are things that I even teach to my kids is you don't have to wait to see other people do it, but if you have the desire, you have the ambition, you can do anything you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way that I thought that, all of those things, those discussions and that environment and during the civil rights movement in the late 60s, early 70s. That's what it was. That's what I got out of it
Mm-hmm.
was it's about living a quality of life that you're proud of and you can sustain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always disappointed when people would say, you can't do that. You can't do that. And these were people that I respected that
Right.
had accomplished things that were beyond them and not expected of them. Even though they succeeded, then they turn around and say, well, you can't do that because they had no understanding of what my agenda was and how I saw the world. They were just, looking at it from the outside.
I'm sure you had those same things when you went into the art world too. I'm sure you banged your head against a lot of people in a lot of different ways when they say,
Yeah.
no, this isn't, And so tell me about Hallmark. How did that go? What was that experience like?
For me, it was like to me. I always say it was like going to graduate school.
Mm.
Uh, nice environment. I was pleased to get a job that paid me a salary,
Mm-hmm.
and that I was going to be surrounded by other artists similar to me
Mm-hmm.
because growing up, there was nobody like me in the neighborhood. In church, there was nobody like me, and I was always the odd guy. That kid's not quite, like us, and we don't know if he's okay or
Right.
or if he's got some problems. So getting to Hallmark was fun. In the first year I was there, just to be in that corporation, I didn't have to pay for art supplies. I got to draw all day. I could experiment with color. Yeah, I got to visit with people from around the country and around the world. They were there working and doing that product, and it was exciting to be embedded in an environment like that where everybody had skills
Mm-hmm.
and exceptional skills because Hallmark recruited students annually from a lot of the art schools around the country. And I don't know how they got some of the international people, but these people were exceptional students, and they come to this company and in order to do that product, and that was fascinating to me. Different life experiences, different all different ages, and for me it was just all day, every day. I'm talking to people, I'm looking at their work, sharing stories. Even after work, you go out for drinks and you talk about the art world and the art world in New York, the art world in California, Chicago. People came from all these different places, and the how exceptional everybody was just like, wow. This is the standards just kept going
Right.
up, and for me, I was just sucking it all up.
Yeah.
And 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 then the 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 issue happened for me was after a year's time, I'm thinking, okay, I know this job, I know it well. I want to do more. And then that's when the realization came in is, no, we're selling a product here. You got to stay within these boundaries. We're
Mm-hmm.
not going to do this and we're not going to do that. This is where you're at. And I'm thinking, oh no, uh, uh, I've got other things I want to do. And they said, well, you can't do that here.
Mm-hmm.
And and then it was about controlling me
Mm.
and my expectations. And so I did that for about I did it for 5 years.
Mm.
But the first year was a fun time. The 4 years that I spent after that was really tough because of corporate policy, corporate politics.
Mm.
It's a corporation,
Yeah.
and they wanted to make a profit, and I was only part of that. And they did not want me to stand out, but I did. I did stand out because of my ambition
Mm-hmm.
and the quality that I was doing, and plus my ethnicity stood out, and that made them kind of crazy because affirmative action was one of the reasons they hired me,
Mm-hmm.
was to fill out a quota. And but the problem I had was, okay, I don't know if that's good or bad,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm here and I'm thinking that because of, as I understood affirmative action, you're going to get very qualified people to fill these positions.
Right.
You're not going to fill them. And okay, I know I graduated, I met all of the minimum standards of high school and college and so on. And my portfolio was good enough for you to hire me. Now you want me to dumb it down
Yeah.
and do. I learned how to paint flowers, and I still enjoy painting flowers. But I went to do wildlife, and they just said, "Well, you got to be here 10 years before you get to do wildlife." I'm like, "I'm ready now."
Right.
No, we got other people that are ahead of you that have been here, and and I'm like, I can't wait that long. you know? And so I made them really crazy, and um, so they tried to slow me down, and they actually said to me, you're painting too fast. You need to slow down because other people can't keep up with you. And I'm like, I'm not, I'm supposed to be doing the best work I can do.
Right.
And, and they were saying, well, you're making other people very nervous because of you're moving at a
Right.
rate. And I just thought, this makes no sense.
Right.
And so I started to speak out about a lot of the unfairness. And then they wanted me to do the black image for the greeting cards. And I did not like the way they were doing the black image. They didn't like the way I was doing it. And it just got kind of goofy. And I just said, I think I need to move on.
Mm.
And that was a decision I made on my own. And so I started working at night, getting freelance work, going back to what I was doing in college. You have a day job, my school is my day job, and then I work at night. And so for me, it was me wanting to be an illustrator, me wanting to do wildlife art and not do florals and decorative things that was selling on the Hallmark cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I started, doing well. And so slowly I was making more at night than I was making during the day.
Mm.
And so that whole thing about learning how money worked and how the art world worked, I was very fortunate to figure that out while I had a day job. And and the coolest thing that happened was Mark English was an illustrator that you probably heard about him.
No, I know exactly what it is. And I talked to Thomas Blackshear, who
Yeah,
has a big relationship with Mark English.
yeah. And so Thomas and I were there at Hallmark at the same time.
Mm.
And we were hanging out with Mark, going to lunch and going to his studio and, just talking about the world that he was in.
Mm-hmm.
And he was looking at Thomas and myself and saying, you guys are drawing like we haven't seen people draw before.
Mm.
You're so young to be drawing like this. And I didn't know the difference. And he was the one that really gave me advice about look at the Society of Illustrators in New York. Look at the people that are doing the work. You say you want to be a wildlife artist. If you want to be a wildlife artist, you got to do it to this level. And he exposed me to a lot of books, a lot of artists I was unfamiliar with. And plus, a lot of the European animal artists. I discovered those guys when I was at Hallmark. And I have a huge library of books that on these artists. And Mark was saying, you can do all of this because you have the ability to draw, you have an imagination. And yes, you're much more prepared than a lot of the people that you're working around because you have the drive and ambition.
Mm-hmm.
And he encouraged me to go out there, give it a shot. And he said, I think you'll do well just because you have that drive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm grateful to him. And I was talking to him and just before he passed away a few years ago. And he just said, I still have stories about you.
Mm-hmm.
Because you at 21 and 22, you were asking me questions and challenging me on things that nobody talked to me about.
Mm.
And he said, you were interesting because you had all of these ideas and you had the ability to draw. And I did some paintings for a portfolio that he encouraged me to create.
Mm-hmm.
He said, if you want to go to New York, you got to go to New York. You got to get into the publishing world. You have to get a portfolio together. And so I did a lot of probably about a good 15 paintings. And at that time, for fantasy was a real popular image for paperback books,
Mm-hmm.
for films. And Frank Frazetta's work
Yeah.
was a big influence on me
Mm-hmm.
because he was drawing out of his imagination. He was creating, really dynamic, dramatic stuff. And I was like, whoa, I like comics.
Right.
And, so comic books were a big influence on me and my ability to draw. And when Mark saw my paintings that I took over to him to get a critique, and he's like, I can't say this is better than I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was a hell of a compliment.
Yeah,
And
that.
he was just, totally impressed. He said, your imagination and your ability to draw from memory, he said, that's a skill that will take you very far.
Mm.
And he always encouraged me, don't stop drawing. He said, because you're drawing like nobody draws. And that is part of, I'm using that advice he gave me because I enjoy drawing. It makes me feel like I'm alive
Mm.
when I'm drawing. I have a pencil in my hand. And so I'm always drawing. Usually I'm drawing. But Mark was the one that really, helped me to get through those 4 years of Hallmark.
Mm.
And he just said, there are other things for you, do your job. He said, you're drawing faster, you're painting faster than people around you. Use your spare time to work in your portfolio so you can go to New York. And that's what I did.
And so you went to New York versus going to LA, because I mean LA has all the things going on with Hollywood and Ralph Bechet and Frank Vazetta are working on that project, Fire and Ice, I think it was, and
Yeah.
so I mean I'm sure there's this like, where do I go? It's probably not going to be in Kansas City. I need to go somewhere else. So what happened? Where'd you go? What'd you do?
When you get vacation time after you're at a company for a year. So I would take my vacation time and travel to New York, Chicago, Dallas, LA, San Francisco. And before I resigned from Hallmark, because Mark had said, you want to go to New York, that's where publishing is.
Mm-hmm.
He did not know much about the movie industry, even though he did a few movie posters. But he knew publishing because he did a lot of magazine illustration, and he was in Detroit for a while working with car companies. But he just thought New York everything was there: the movie industry, publishing, products, all of that. And so I took a week and went to New York with a portfolio that I had created. Um, you know, just trying to anticipate what I was going to run into. And it was impressive. I was like, whoa, this is a big city. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
This is too big for me. It's kind of intimidating, but I did, go through Manhattan and had meetings with publishers. And once I said I was from Kansas City, they were like, we use New York artists.
Mm.
We don't use people outside of the state. I'm like, are you serious? And
Mm-hmm.
Mark English is not
Right.
in.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that didn't matter to them. Is I was what 22, 23 years old,
Oh
23,
God. Yeah.
and people are looking at me like, "Are you sure you're in the right place?"
Mm.
Uh, and because I got original portfolio with big original artwork, and and this African American kid walking into an office,
Right.
and people are like, "You're delivering? You make deliveries down the hall?" And I'm like, "No, I'm here for a meeting. A meeting with whom?" Uh, and I give the art director's name and so on, and people are just like, "Wow."
Mm.
And I know that was uncomfortable for a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
and but I knew that was going to happen, and I realized also from that experience, I need to do something different. And I met an illustrator, Bob Heindel. Um, Mark English had an agent in New York. I cannot think of his name right now. And I had a meeting with him. And he looked at me and just said, you're in the wrong place. You don't understand what you're doing. And I was a little disappointed with that experience. But at the same time, I got an illustrator named Bob Heindel was in his office and heard him talking to me. And he was a little disappointed that his agent was talking to me in that manner. So he stepped in and said, let me talk to this young man. And he sat down, looked at my work, and he said, wow, this is great. And then when I told him that I knew Mark English, and he says, so, Mark, you're doing this, then you need to do this. And he gave me phone numbers of people to call.
Wow.
And that's how I got my first agent, was from Robert Hundell, writing down a phone number, said, call this guy and see if he will work with you.
Mm.
And he said, you're in Kansas City, this guy's in New York. He can be an in-between for you because people are not going to take you seriously. He said, because there's no category you fit in.
Mm.
With your ability, the way you're talking to me, your ambition. And he said, you need somebody to speak for you.
Mm.
And that's what I did. I got that. That was the first agent I got. I started doing paperback books at night after working at Hallmark. And I started to make an income from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to do more than paperback books. And this fellow was so locked into paperback books that he did not want to step outside of that he knew that. I wanted to do movie work, the movie advertising. I wanted to do work for National Geographics. I wanted to do product illustration, on and on and on. And he says, I don't do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I said, then I got to get another agent. And so I took another vacation time, went to Chicago because I'd heard there were agents there that did a lot of product illustrations for Anheuser-Busch, a lot of the beer companies, and magazines. And, they did, I don't think they did movie things there in Chicago, but it was mainly about products and publishing. And I did that. I got an agent there in Chicago and started to do work for Anheuser-Busch, Miller Beer. It was a lot of Coca-Cola. Just a lot of the corporations.
That had to take a lot of courage when you told that guy, because you went all the way to New York, you were able to get this agent, you were doing well with it, but you literally said, I've got to let you go. That's got to take courage.
No, I was not that blunt with it. I slowly just kind of let it the
Oh, what?
relationship
Okay.
dissolved because once I got the agent in Chicago,
Yeah.
you know, the product illustration paid 3 times what publishing paid.
Yeah.
So
Right.